since we're talking about the threat of nuclear war and otherwise, he asked, I'd be interested in both your expectations for human society if when we move beyond Mars. Will those societies be industrial based? How will it be governed? How will criminal infractions be dealt with? When you read or watch sci-fi, what comes closest to sounding logical? Do you think about our society beyond Earth? If we colonize Mars, if we colonize space?
Yeah, well, I think I have a pretty humbling picture of that. I mean, so because we're still going to be the apes that we are. So when you imagine colonizing Mars, you have to imagine a first fist fight on Mars.
Yeah.
You have to imagine a first murder on Mars.
Also infidelity.
Yeah,
somebody
extramarital affairs on Mars, right? So it's going to get really homely and boring really fast. I think it's like only the spacesuits or what the other exigencies of just living in that atmosphere or lack thereof will limit how badly we can behave on Mars.
But do you think most of the interaction will be still in meat space versus digital? Do you think we're like living through a transformation of a kind where we're going to be doing more and more interaction in digital space? Like everything we've been complaining about Twitter, is it possible that Twitter is just the early days of a broken system that's actually giving birth to a better working system that's ultimately digital?
I think we're going to experience a pendulum swing back into the real world. I mean, I think many of us are experiencing that now anyway. I mean, just wanting to have face-to-face encounters and spend less time on our phones and less time online. I mean, I think maybe everyone isn't going in that direction, but I do notice it myself, and I notice. I mean, once I got off Twitter, then I noticed the people who were never on Twitter, right? And then and the people who were never basically. I mean, I have a lot of friends who were never on Twitter.
Yeah,
they actually never understood what I was doing on Twitter. It's like they just like it wasn't that they were seeing it and then reacting to it. They just didn't know. It's like being on. It's like I'm not on Reddit either, but I don't spend any time thinking about not being on Reddit. Right? It's like I'm just not on Reddit.
So you think the pursuit of human happiness is better achieved, more effectively achieved outside of Twitter world?
Well, I think all we have is our attention in the end. And we just have to notice what these various tools are doing to it. And it became very clear to me that it was an unrewarding use of my attention. Now, it's not to say there isn't some digital platform that's conceivable that would be useful, but and rewarding. But yeah, I mean, we just have, our life is doled out to us in moments, and we're continually solving this riddle of what is going to suffice to make this moment engaging and meaningful and aligned with who I want to be now and how I want the future to look, right? That we have this tension between being in the present and becoming in the future. And, it's a seeming paradox. Again, it's not really a paradox, but it can seem like, I do think the ground truth for personal well-being is to find a mode of being where you can pay attention to the present moment. And this is, meditation by another name. You can pay attention to the present moment with sufficient, gravity that you recognize that just consciousness itself in the present moment, no matter what's happening, is already a circumstance of freedom and contentment and tranquility. Like you can be happy now before anything happens. Mm-hmm. Like before this next desire gets gratified, before this next problem gets solved. There's this kind of ground truth that you're free, that consciousness is free and open and unencumbered by really any problem until you get lost in thought about all the problems that may yet be real for you.
So the ability to catch and observe consciousness, that in itself is a source of happiness.
Yeah, without being lost in thought. And so what this happens haphazardly for people who don't meditate because they find something in their life that's so captivating It's so pleasurable. It's so thrilling. It can even be scary, but it can be even being scared is captivating. Like so it gets it gets their attention, right? Whatever it is. If you like, Sebastian Junger, or, was wrote a great book about people's experience in war here. It's like it can be, strangely, it can be the best experience anyone's ever had because everything, it's like only the moment matters, right? Like the bullet is whizzing by your head. You're not thinking about your 401k or that thing that you didn't say last week to the person you shouldn't have been talking about. You're not thinking about Twitter. It's like you're just fully immersed in the present moment. Meditation is the only way. I mean, that word can mean many things to many people, but what I mean by meditation is simply the discovery that there is a way to engage the present moment directly, regardless of what's happening. You don't need to be in a war. You don't need to be having sex. You don't need to be on drugs. You don't need to be surfing. You don't need nothing. It doesn't have to be a peak experience. It can be completely ordinary, but you can recognize that in some basic sense, there's only this, and everything else is something you're thinking. You're thinking about the past. You're thinking about the future, and thoughts themselves have no substance, right? It's fundamentally mysterious that any thought ever really commandeers your sense of who you are and makes you anxious or afraid or angry or whatever it is. And the more you discover that, the half-life of all these negative emotions that blow all of us around get much, much shorter, right? And you can literally just, the anger that would have kept you angry for hours or days lasts, 4 seconds, because the moment it arises, you recognize it and you can get off that. You can decide, at minimum, you can decide whether it's useful to stay angry at that moment. And, obviously it usually isn't.
And the illusion of free will is one of those thoughts.
Yeah. It's all just happening, right? Like even the mindful and meditative response to this is just happening. It's just like even the moments where you recognize or not recognize is just happening. It's not that this does open up a degree of freedom for a person, but it's not a freedom that gives any motivation to the notion of free will. It's just a new way of being in the world.